Well, for more on the significance of the Michigan primary and concerns of people in Michigan, especially those who are Arab American, we go now to Michigan, where we're joined by two guests. Chris Savage is a Michigan-based political writer and founder of Eclectablog, and Dawud Walid is the executive director of CAIR Michigan. We welcome you both to Democracy Now! Chris, let's start with you. The significance of how the Republican presidential candidates addressed Michigan, the issues they raised, and the significance of Mitt Romney, yes, winning, but by a very narrow margin. And it is the state he was born in, where his father was governor.
Yeah, that is probably the significant thing, is that it wasn't a blowout. You know, when he has got such strong ties, at least in his own mind anyway, to Michigan. I looked at the amount of money that was spent by his campaign and by the PACs that support him, and if you do the math in terms of how many votes he got, he paid $10.40 for every vote he got yesterday, and he outspent Rick Santorum 2-1. So when you look at those numbers, he ought to have done a lot better than he did, and it just goes to show you how desperate he was to win this state.
So I want to turn to a clip of Mitt Romney speaking in Michigan yesterday. He was responding to claims he's been unable to excite the Republican base.
It's very easy to excite the base with incendiary comments. And we've seen throughout the campaign that if you're willing to say really outrageous things that are accusative and attacking of President Obama, that you're going to jump up in the polls. I'm not willing to light my hair on fire to try and get support. I am who I am. I'm a person with extensive experience in the private sector, in the economy. I understand job creation from a personal standpoint and from a theoretical standpoint. I want to use those skills to help the country, and if I get selected, great, and if I don't, I can live with that too.
That was Mitt Romney. Chris Savage, your response.
Well, you know, Michigan's had pretty good experience over the last 2 years, or I should say a pretty bad experience over the last 2 years with a CEO governor. And the problems that Michigan faces in terms of our crumbling infrastructure and our failing cities and stuff are not being addressed by a business-like approach. When things are bad in the economy, the government needs to step up. That's important. And for Romney to suggest that that Detroit should have been allowed to go bankrupt was, you know, it offended not only Democrats in Michigan, it offended a lot of people in Michigan. And when you look at what's happened since then and the resurgence, you know, Mitt Romney needs to come to Michigan. The big three auto companies are profitable, all three of them, for the first time in something like 7 or 8 years. And, you know, thousands of people are being hired. GM's making record profits, and people are starting to go back to work. But the problem that we're having right now is that the Republicans are failing to address the core systemic issues in places like Detroit and Highland Park and Benton Harbor and Pontiac and Flint, places like this that are truly struggling. And, you know, their cut taxes and bring in business approach is going to bypass these cities, because there's nothing there that will compel people to come in and put businesses in these cities. So until we start reinvesting in our old manufacturing cities that are in real trouble right now, this rising tide from business tax cuts is going to really pass them by, and it's going to benefit cities that are already doing pretty well.
Chris Savage, you've written extensively about the emergency manager law in Michigan. Talk about its significance.
Well, the emergency manager law was passed last spring by our GOP Congress and signed into law by Rick Snyder. And it basically, the original emergency manager law was put into place to help cities that were facing bankruptcy in school districts. This new law actually gives a single individual, the emergency manager who was put into place by the governor, the ability to basically wipe away the local government. It disenfranchises local voters, and it it allows them to break union contracts, sell off city assets, and things like this. So, you know, there's a large pushback against this for very good reasons. It's disenfranchising just an amazing number of people. In fact, if Detroit gets an emergency manager, over half of the African Americans in Michigan will be without local representation in their government. So this is a really profound change, and something that's very shocking. And I'm glad to see it getting more attention now, because this is really historic in terms of the implications. Today at the state capitol, the Stand Up for Democracy Coalition is going to be submitting over 200,000, close to 250,000 petition signatures to put this on the ballot in November. They need about 160,000 and change signatures, and they have close to 250,000. If those signatures are validated, the emergency manager law then goes on hold until we can vote on it in the fall.
Dawud Walid, there is a large Arab American population in Michigan, a large Muslim population in Michigan. Talk about the feeling about the Republican primary in Michigan and how the Arab American community was appealed to by the candidates.
Well, going back to 2008, 90% of the American Muslim community, including Muslims in Michigan, voted for President Barack Obama. In saying that, there is some disenchantment with some of President Obama's policies in terms of civil liberties, such as his signing of the National Defense Authorization Act, his reaffirming the Patriot Act, and some of his foreign policy stances. However, within the GOP, say Ron Paul, in terms of some of his foreign policy stances and civil liberties, the Muslim community in general and Arab Americans really haven't been drawn to the GOP, one, because they haven't done any real outreach, but two, the GOP has used Islamophobia and xenophobia as a way of stirring up their base. From Romney to Gingrich and Santorum, they seem to use immigrants and Muslims as a whipping board to try to drum up support within the GOP base.
Now, we have been covering the story that has been that AP has continued to unfold about the New York Police Department going beyond New York in targeting Muslims and tracking Muslims and Arab Americans. Michigan is on the Canadian border. First, I want to play the New York Police Commissioner Ray Kelly last month invoking the 9/11 attacks to defend the monitoring of Muslims.
I believe we're doing what we have to do pursuant to the law to protect the city that's been attacked successfully twice and had 14 plots against it in the last 2 decades.
We now know that the AP, because of the Associated Press, that money was used from the White House, federal money was used in this monitoring. I wanted to get your response to this, as well as what's happening on the Michigan border with Canada.
Well, being in Michigan and our national organization, CAIR, and we have an office in New York, we've joined other advocates in calling for Ray Kelly to resign. Ray Kelly, as well as his deputy chief, have completely trampled upon the spirit of the United States Constitution and wasted millions of taxpayer dollars with having agents even overseas, much less going through in Connecticut and New Jersey, spying on where Muslims eat kebab to bean pie. And they have not effectuated any tangible arrests relating to terrorism in regards to all this money they spent. They've basically been surveilling Americans with no predication, and this doesn't even include how the New York Police Department has been notorious with its stop and frisk program that has targeted Latino youth, black youth, and the number of unarmed youth of color that have been shot, and some fatally shot by the New York Police Department. In terms of the border that we share, Michigan with Canada, Michigan is a very unique state because under current law, the U.S. Border Patrol and Customs Border Protection has 100-mile jurisdiction from the international border in which they can stop anyone without predication and ask for them to produce proof of citizenship. Because of the Great Lakes being considered international borders or part of the international border, the entire state of Michigan is within the jurisdiction of U.S. Border Patrol and Customs Border Protection. Therefore, we have instances in Southwest Detroit where Latinos born and raised here in Detroit have been stopped and been detained for hours and asked to provide citizenship. We have issues of Muslims at the border and re-entering the border have been stopped by CBP and asked questions such as, do you pray? How many times a day do you pray? Which mosque do you go to? Who's your imam? Even asking theological questions about how they believe or interpret certain verses of the Quran, our holy text. So we believe that Customs Border Patrol and Customs Border Protection and U.S. Border Patrol are completely out of order right now, and they are engaged in racial and religious profiling.
This is under the Obama administration. How is this going to affect the general election, Dawud Walid?
Well, I can say right now that as Muslims here in Michigan, they aren't crazy about President Obama in regards to his civil rights positions, such as on immigration reform, lack thereof, on the record amount of deportations that have taken place under his administration by ICE, Immigration Customs Enforcement, the invasive nature of surveillance of our community by the Federal Bureau of Investigations. But at the same time, at least rhetorically, the president is a lot better than what we see from the GOP. So it's my estimation that although the Muslim community probably is not going to vote for the GOP, I don't think that Muslims in Michigan and across the United States of America are going to be very excited about going out to the polls. And as an advocate who encourages civic engagement, I'm really encouraging my constituents to go out and vote and really to focus more on the local politics and not let their dissatisfaction with the Obama administration regarding civil rights to chill them from going to the polls.
Dawud Walid, I want to thank you for being with us, Executive Director of CAIR Michigan, and also thanks to Chris Savage, the Michigan-based political writer and founder of Eclectablog.